Awesome. And for those of you that love me talking cocky, don't you worry. I got the record button. I literally almost hit the wrong button. So that keeps me humble. Alrighty. So welcome everyone. Where we're going to kick off today is on page 34. And we're diving into the chapter More About Alcoholism. And so we're going to be 34, middle of the page. And as we dive in, what we're looking at in the chapter More About Alcoholism, especially where we're at today, is we're going to be looking at the mental obsession. And that's what we're trying to see. Examples from our own lives of this mental obsession. As we look at the stories of some of these people, we're going to get into our friend called Jim. We're going to get to our Jaywalker. We probably won't get to Fred, although who doesn't love Fred? He's great. He's a great guy. So we'll probably have to do Fred next week based on my own guesstimation of my ability to look at time. And then we also like to look at it through the lens of what we call the cycle. And I won't do a full review of the cycle, just very quickly kind of explain what happens. For somebody like me, I say I'm never going to do it again. And I'm thrust into abstinence, and that doesn't feel very good. And a day, a week, a month, several months down the line, I get a thought, and that thought says, hey, this time will be different. And I'm like, you know what? This time will be different. And I take that first drink or drug or relationship or whatever brings you to this study, and I get my sense of ease and comfort, and off I go. I need more, and I'm on that spree, and I go until I can't stop. And eventually that spree is arrested, and I come to filled with guilt and shame and remorse, and I say, that's it. I'm never going to do this again, and I'm thrust into abstinence, and so on and so forth. So we're going to lens into that as we go through today. All right, page 34. We're at the second full paragraph, about halfway through the page. And it says, for those who are unable to drink moderately, that's me, and that is any of us, moderate drinking. Yeah, I know, there's some of you guys are like, yeah, me too. I'm like, rock on. We cannot drink like successful human beings. Also, if you're wondering, what does a successful human being drink like? To give you a hint, their pants are dry. Is that but it's what we're talking about is the physical allergy, that idea that once I start to drink, I need more, and the more that I drink, the more that I need that next drink. And if that is my experience, I can't drink moderately. Okay, so they're talking about us. We had an informal show of hands. They're talking about us. We cannot drink moderately. The question is how to stop altogether. Because if I can never, ever safely drink or use or whatever brings you to the study ever again, man, I can't do it again. So I got to stay abstinent. How do I do this? And it says, we are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop, which I will say, if you are coming to the Big Book study, I say this with my sponsees, you got to be really desperate if you're working with me. And so listen, if you're listening to me natter on for an hour, I want you to know you are a hopeless case. Like, it is bad. You've got to have come to the end of yourself. So don't you worry. You're the real deal. Welcome. But it is a question, because I might not want to stop, but do I want to stop? And then it says, whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. And lack of control, anytime we see lack of control in this book, what we're referencing, welcome, 34. Lack of control is the physical allergy, but lack of choice is the mental obsession. And what it looks like to be able to quit on a non-spiritual basis is quitting because people said it would be a good idea. It looks like quitting for our family. It looks like quitting for our children. It looks like quitting for a relationship. It looks like getting out of the relationship because I don't need to drink at that guy no more. It looks like going to detox, going to treatment. It looks like going to the gym. We were talking about how abs don't keep me abstinent. You know, those are non-spiritual ways to quit drinking or quit using. Going to therapy and counseling and psychologists and psychiatrists. And I want to be very clear, there's nothing wrong with that. But it didn't work for somebody like me. And another non-spiritual way to quit drinking? Just going to meetings. And if I am one of those people where My experiences, I tried some of that, all of that, most of that. I might be a person who cannot quit based upon a non-spiritual basis. And it's one of those things, man, if somebody, and I had somebody today who reached out and wanted help, but they're like, yeah, I'm not ready to quit. I'm not wanting to quit. And I'm like, that's okay. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to do this. I'm not here to convince anyone. Girl, I don't have time for that. And I'm not that powerful. That's alcoholism's job. That's not my job. But what I suggested, I was like, why don't you try anything and everything that you can think of to manage this or control this or quit on your own power? And one of two things will happen. One is it'll work, and then you don't got to deal with me. So that's a win-win. Or two, it won't work. And then we get a sense that I might be somebody who is not able to quit upon a non-spiritual basis. And I want to be quite frank with everyone here in the room today. I did not try everything. I did not try every non-spiritual basis there is. I did try some of them, like moving to Lethbridge. There's a couple people here from like Alberta that are like, Lethbridge? That's just windy with crackheads. I know. Not a surprise that it didn't work. You know what I mean? But like, I did not try everything, but my experience is everything that I tried failed. And if your experience is that everything that you tried failed, and you come to the end of yourself and you're having to listen to me natter on for an hour, you might be a hopeless case. And I am glad you're here. I'm having fun that you're here. Hope you are too. And so that really is emphasizing the hopelessness, the love of family, the love of children, the love, man, it's not enough. Nothing less than a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. Anything less than that, and I am doomed to drink or use again. And then it says, many of us felt we had plenty of character. I did have moral and philosophical convictions. We're going to read that galore. I had them galore. I had these values. I didn't think I was a bad person. I didn't think I was a bad person, but I also thought I was the biggest piece of garbage that ever existed. I was able to hold those two thoughts. I don't know. See, I'm able for non-dual thinking. Look at that. I can think I'm not the worst and the worst at the same time, Just open-minded page over here, right? But that wasn't enough. The morals and the values and the love that I have for others and others have for me, man, that wasn't enough. And then there's this. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever. Did I have that feeling inside of myself, man, I don't want to do this again? And it wasn't enough. In fact, it says, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. This is it. This is what is confusing and mind-boggling to us and the people who love us and watch us. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. My real problem is not that when I take a drink or a drug, I cannot control the amount that I take. My real problem is that I continue to go back to it, despite it ruining my life, despite it hurting those around me, despite saying I never want to do it again. That is baffling, but that is the core of what is wrong with me. It's killing me, and I go and I do it again. And so it says, how then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? And see, that's the thing. You don't need to convince me you're an alcoholic or an addict or a compulsive, whatever brings you to this study. I'm not the one that needs to be convinced. Listen, I qualify for Al-Anon. I will be easily convinced. I want to fix you and save you. I have done some Al-Anon work, in case anyone's a little worried. I've done a little bit. But I'm not the one that needs to be convinced. We each need to be convinced of our own illness. I'm the only one. Because I'm sure I'm not alone. Anyone here ever have an intervention? I don't talk about it that often. It didn't go well. Wasn't super open. There were people who were very concerned about how I was living my life and very concerned about my problem years before I could really see it as an issue. They don't need to be convinced. I need to be convinced because I am the only one that can do anything about it. If I am convinced I have this illness, man, I'm going to do this work because I don't got other options. Going to the gym isn't going to do it. Getting into the relationship isn't going to do it. Getting out of the relationship isn't going to do it. The boy that we meet in detox, the blue of his grippy socks matches the blue of his eyes. and the black of, the black of the detox or the decaf coffee, because I won't let you have caffeine. It matches his hair. Oh, it was meant to be. He's not gonna fix me, and I'm not gonna fix him. You know what I mean? I am the one that needs to be convinced, because if I'm not convinced, I'm not gonna do it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to lay down this information so that you're able to pick it up and say, match it with our own experience. Is this me? And if it is, let's go to work. If it's not, I mean, girl, you got like some weekends available. You can do hobbies and stuff. Tell me about that. I'm supposed to be doing hobbies or something, and I'm like, is it crochet and windsurfing? You can do it at the same time. I'm not a hobby person. Anywho, that sounds unsafe. Actually, it's pointy and tilty. That's a terrible idea. Don't take me for any of that advice. Anywho, so it says, the experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful. So that idea of, if I don't think I have this problem, girl, just don't drink. Just don't drink. That's all, right? Do that for a year. Just don't drink for a year. See how you're feeling, right? So we think that will be helpful. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to test to see, do I have the mental obsession? And it says, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. And the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, that is the mental obsession. So if you're writing in your book, which, I mean, you should, it's fun. You can make a little note that is the mental obsession. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. This is that part of the problem that, like, this is what's really got me, and this is what's baffling. And it says, what sort of thinking dominates? And when we're talking about that, imagine I'm being dominated by my thoughts. Now, we talk about the mental obsession as the lie. There is a lie that is dominating me, who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink. Now, two things. So that our mind being dominated by thoughts of drinking, that's an example of the mental obsession. But keep in mind that mental obsession, we're going to see that mental obsession sometimes looks like suddenly. But also that desperate experiment. And that's another synonym for the mental obsession. And last week, we're talking about the experiments for those scientifically minded, right? And the second experiment was just don't drink for a year. We just mentioned that. The first experiment was try and go out and try some controlled drinking. 3 drinks, between 1 and 3 drinks, no more, no less. Try that every day and see how that goes. You know what I mean? And everyone here is like, that sounds awful. Oh, I don't need to do that. But when the mental obsession kicks in, what is one of the things that we tell ourselves? One of the things is, I'll just have 3. It'll be okay. But in this moment here and now, we know, girl, that is insane. But when the mental obsession is on us, it is that desperate experiment. Maybe this time will be different, or maybe this time I won't have all the consequences. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Yeah, that crux being that most important part, that puzzling feature. Absolutely. I didn't look it up in my old-timey dictionary. I forgot to do that. Because Rob's got the unofficial old-timey dictionary, and I've got the unofficial old-timey dictionary, because I got an old dictionary, because I'm fun at parties and stuff. And that one, I had looked it up a while ago, but I didn't get the fresh definition. So we're just running from memory, which is not great. So friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. So coming to the end of these consequences, I've ruined my life, I've lost my job, I'm out of money, I'm going to get a divorce, and what is my only solution? Back to the bar. That's crazy, but that is alcoholism. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? And we're trying to lens in to that mental obsession. So our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. Now, Jim, I was going to say he's a handsome fella, but we don't really got a good picture of him. His name is Ralph Furlong. And if you're wondering how to spell that, or you want to look up more about him, Rob put the spelling in the chat. And if you look behind Rob, you can see a picture of Ralph. And if you're wondering which one is Ralph, it's the one, he's going to point, it's the one who you can't really see at all. Yep, that guy. So, handsome fella. And so let's talk about Jim. Let's talk about Ralph. So it says this man has a charming wife and family. That sounds like, a great non-spiritual way to quit drinking. And who here, many of us have families and spouses that we love, but that's not enough. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. And what that means is either through marriage or through family. What that means, like through his family or through marriage, he was able to become the owner of a car dealership. So again, what we're trying to point to with Ralph is, he's kind of a normal guy. Here's a guy that's able to, he's got a wonderful life, wife, family. He owns this car dealership. It says he had a commendable World War record, so he was a good man, able to show up for duty. Wasn't like this abnormal guy. It says he is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. Guy, Jim, our homie Jim. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. So when we go back to the cycle, what we'll see, well, actually, I'll just share it on the screen real quick. When we look at the cycle, what we're starting to see is maybe a sign of his spiritual malady, that nervous disposition. I don't know about you. There have been times where people might have, not super recently, but there have been times in my life where people might say, hey, Mitch is a little anxious. And the anxiety that is happening inside of me is like, but who it's presenting is just a little anxious. And so I believe what we're pointing to is his spiritual malady. Now, having a nervous disposition does not necessarily make me an alcoholic. It's not one of the diagnostic criteria. That's the mental obsession and the physical allergy. But it's helpful to know and see that while sober, he's feeling a little nervous. He's feeling a little anxious. And what we're going to see as we go through his story, we're going to really laser into that mental obsession. So, all right. So it says he did no drinking until he was 35. Oh, that's my age. Sorry, just I remember when I got here, I'm like, old guy. Man, that is the real struggle. And I'm joking, by the way, but the real struggle of getting sober young is you have to stay sober through all your comments about the old people that you then become in the rooms. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm an old person. For anyone over 35, I've humbled myself. All right. So he did no drinking until he was 35. And it says in a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. And you can make a little note in your book that is the physical allergy. So we had the mental obsession for the nervous disposition and physical allergy for so violent when intoxicated. Because if you are wondering, somebody who has the ability to control their drinking is not drinking their way into an asylum. And I'm just saying that as somebody who maybe at one or maybe more points in her life has ended up in the back of a police car and taken to the emergency room for a psychiatric hold, like a lady, I'm sure I'm the only one. And so if I have the ability to control how much I'm drinking, I'm stopping before then, because that's not a good time. You know what I'm saying? So it's an indication he has a lack of control. And it says, on leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we'd found. So what they were sharing with him was examples from their own life of the mental obsession and the physical allergy. They were likely sharing examples from their own life of the cycle and really bearing down on the hopeless feature, the mental obsession, which is what we're talking about today. And the answer that they had found, and that answer is that spiritual awakening. And man, when we have that spiritual awakening, we want to give it away to others. So they were giving him that. So they were laying down the foundation of step 1 and the foundation of step 2. And then it says he made a beginning. And I want to point something out. In my 12-step. In the rooms of modern 12-step, here's what I found he made a beginning means. Some of a 4. Did a little bit of a 4 and then sat on it and did nothing else. You know what I mean? There's a lot of times I'll run into people or like people who reach out, or I'll reach out and they're like, oh, I did those steps and they didn't work. And I kind of lovingly ask some questions like, oh, all of them? More lovingly than it's coming across right now. I know it's coming across a little passive aggressive. I hear the tone. Like you had sponsees, you're working with others. Usually not. In fact, never. That's never been the case. You're praying and you were meditating. You're engaging in that step 11. You had that evening review. You were taking that quiet time. You had made all your amends. You had, done all of them. You'd done, I know all. What a crazy page. You had done a 5th step with God and another human being, not a 5th step in your head. You did all of your 4th step. Yeah, in my modern experience, it's some of a 4, maybe a 5, stalled out on 9, and even still, we get real freedom here. Freedom. We get the capacity to be recovered. But there's something that is asked of us, and what is asked of somebody like me is to continue to keep in fit spiritual condition. I do that by continuing to keep my house clean, and I do that by working with others and trying to grow in that relationship that I have with a power greater than myself. Man, that's what I'm called to do. And if I stop doing that, it doesn't matter how many big book studies I do, how many sponsees I had, I was telling Rob before the meeting, I'm like, things are interesting. I'm doing like 40 minutes of meditation in the morning and at night. I need it. Don't be impressed. It's more be concerned. But like I'm doing all this. But if I stop doing this, I will erode this stuff between me and God. And eventually I will drink again. You see, I say this a lot. Before I come into the rooms of 12-step, there's only one reason for me to relapse, and it's the inevitability of the first drink because of the mental obsession, because I'm going to relapse. That's step 1. And after I come to the rooms of 12-step, there's one more, a failure to continue to grow spiritually. So he made a beginning, and then he stopped taking action. And it says his family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. So one of the things, his family reassembled. I always want to point this out. Oftentimes in the rooms, we say it's progress, not perfection. And I am known to be a bit pedantic. It's a defect of mine. But it is helpful to point out it is spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. How am I progressing spiritually? The family coming back is wonderful and beautiful and important, and I meant to spend time with my family, but that is not what will keep me sober. And then when it says he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking, he used to own it. He was the boss. He was the man in charge, large and in charge, working the thing. And now he's a salesman. I want y'all to know I'm not that humble. You know what I mean? I would be pissed. I'm sure no one here would be like, listen, they're doing it wrong. We'd all be like, yes, I'm so happy to take directions from somebody who's now running a company I used to own. Yeah, I'd be filling up with resentment. I just point that out because maybe that might give us a lens into his spiritual condition and how things are going. And it says, all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Absolutely. We just got a question in the chat, and I will absolutely ADHD. So if you're wanting the recording after, all of them are going to be uploaded on YouTube and are available on YouTube, and you can find them by searching a New Light Big Book Study. Oh, man, the people who are listening to this on YouTube right now, it's this meta moment that I accidentally created. They're like, I've done it. It's a New Light Big Book Study. The channel is Big Book Compendium. Rob's delightful, and we'll put it in the chat, I am sure. And by the way, if you have any questions, you throw it in the chat and I will absolutely grab a hold of those. And if you're like, man, I would just like to see Paige go on a tangent, it doesn't take much. So It says, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Again, why would he relapse? He did not continue to grow spiritually. It says, to his consternation, like he's as baffled as anyone else. He found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. That's 6 times in a row. And yeah, amazement, confusion, like what? And it says, on each of these occasions, we worked with him. And that shows the willingness they had to go and carry this message. Each of these times he relapsed, each of these times they went to carry the message and said, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had a deep affection. And what we see there sounds like a swearing off. Almost even a step one. He knows he's a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He is swearing off. I never want to do this again. I don't want to lose my family. Man, I want to stay sober. I'm never going to do it again. Top of page 36. Yet he got drunk again. And you see, that is, again, we're talking about the baffling feature of alcoholism. I don't want to do it. And yet I do it again. That's the power of this thing. So it says, we asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. So this is his story. I came into work on Tuesday morning. I always like to make the joke, Monday, work Monday, I remember I felt irritated. I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Yeah, I'd be a little irritated. And anyone ever have like a sponsee where you're like, girl, could you just take it through the columns? And they're like, it's not a resentment. I'm just irritated. I'm like, that's a synonym. Let's put it through the columns. And by the way, we can go ask my sponsor. I'm sure I do the same thing. But he's irritated. And again, we're seeing that restless, irritable discontent. Now, I'm just pointing that out. But we're going to see that when we get to Fred next week, it was a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. But I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. You ever have a few words with the boss? Is it ever anything not serious? Or is it always a little bit of that like call to the teachers, the principal's office or the headmaster's study, a little bit like whoop. Again, I'm joking. This is just me being trying to be funny. Don't know if it lands, but I imagine it's the boss going like, "What Monday? We're on Monday." You know what I'm saying? That's my sort of visual. And it says, then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. Now, what I want to point out about this is the 1930s. They don't have like car dealerships in the same way. They don't have a lot of public transportation in the same way. And it would make sense that if he's trying to make a sale of a car, that he would go and try to like take the car to them, have them drive it around. So there's nothing crazy about this. He's got good motives, good intention. He's just going to do his job. That's what he's going to do. On the way, I felt hungry. That is reasonable. So I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. Now, something I want to point out. We don't got McDonald's. We don't got drive-thrus. We don't have a lot of convenience stations. He can't stop by Dunkin' Donuts. I was in the States a little while ago. I was in Illinois, the land of David G and David G on Wednesdays. And I got to have some Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm like, that's delightful. America runs on Dunkin'. They don't have Dunkin' Donuts in the 1930s. He can't, pop in for a quick sugary treat. So there's a place in the country, not well populated, a place to eat. It does have a bar. But this is something that's really important. I had no intention of drinking. No intention of drinking. The most mind-boggling thing is my intention has no ability to keep me sober. There's times I work with sponsees and they'll tell me about maybe like going to, a bar or a thing when they're in their early recovery before they've, taken the actions of these steps. And I'll point out like, hey, that might not be a good idea until we are recovered. And then it's got directions on how we can go anywhere in the world. And they're like, but I had no intention of drinking. I feel like my intention has an effect. And in other areas of my life, my intention has an effect. but not in this one. In this area of my life, my intention to not drink or use or whatever it brings you to the study has no effect. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. He can't do a little TikTok about his car dealership, you know? He can't do a car salesman TikTok. He's got to go and kind of do some face-to-face. I mean, even cold calling would be a little like newfangled in those days, I imagine, because, you know, not everybody had their own phone. Some had a party line, you know what I mean? And so that idea of like, that's not an insane thing. That's reasonable. He's hungry, you know, he's going to find a customer. That's good motives. And it says, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months that I was sober. So again, we're not seeing anything crazy. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Nothing crazy. Still no thought of drinking. Again, no thought, no notion. And then it says, I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. The only time that ever raised a red flag was when I was working with somebody who was in Overeaters Anonymous, and she was like, oh, maybe. But for most of us, not a red flag. Guy's a little hungry. Fair enough, right? And then suddenly, and I really want to emphasize suddenly, no intention of drinking, no desire to drink, suddenly. And you can make a little note that is the mental obsession. And the most incredible thing is, in this moment, he has absolutely no mental defense against suddenly. Suddenly hits. And it says, the thought crossed my mind, not the drink crossed my lips. The thought crossed his mind. And there was no defense that was raised. The thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey into my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. He wasn't thinking about the asylum. He's not playing the tape to the end. He's not thinking of the consequences. There was no defense against suddenly. Suddenly hits. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I also want to point out, every time for years, I would read this story and I'd be like, ugh. Like, I'd be like, that is gross. Like, I bet that it curdles and like, ew, gross, a little judgy. And then I just kind of forget in this moment that like Kahlua and like White Russians are a thing. It's not the weirdest thing to mix milk and alcohol, but I just in this moment, in this story, I'm always like, ew, gross. That's weird. Let's be quite frank, I have had weirder concoctions. I won't tell you about it in case some of you guys are having your dinner. Anywho, I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart. So he has a vague notion that this is not a good idea. And that is not enough. But felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. Man, any idea that this might not be a good idea pushed away. And that is the mental obsession. That is the power of this thing. And then it says the experiment went so well. The experiment going well might be the ease and comfort of that first drink, if you're making a little note, you know what I mean? What a great experiment. I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. And what we're seeing is that phenomenon of craving kick off, that physical allergy. So you can write a little note if you're writing in your book, physical allergy. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. The journey to the asylum is the spree. The spree gets arrested once he's in the asylum, just if you're wondering how that ties into the cycle. Here was a threat of commitment, a loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. So here's the thing. The love of family, the suffering that alcoholism always caused him, being in an asylum, that's not fun. You know what I mean? All of that plus knowledge, knowing he's an alcoholic. These members of AA were showing up and saying, this is what the allergy looks like. And more than that, this is what the mental obsession looks like. And his knowledge of the mental obsession is not enough to keep him sober. That is the power of this thing. You know what I mean? Self-knowledge is not enough to keep me sober. And like book knowledge, not enough to keep me sober. I can tell you this is Ralph. You know, I can tell you some of the history. I can point to pages. I can do that stuff. But having it here will not keep me sober. I need to take the actions. I need this to be an experience. I need to experience a power greater than myself. And the only way that I do that is through the actions of the 12 steps. And that lets God work in my life, and God keeps me sober. So self-knowledge, nada. Knowing I'm an alcoholic, knowing the mental obsession, heck, being able to explain the mental obsession, not enough to keep me sober. It says, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call it plain insanity, the mental obsession. How can such a lack How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? Now, a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight is the mental obsession. That's also the mental obsession. The inability to see the consequences. That's what we're talking about. And it says, and again, I love this. This is the book meeting us where we're at, because we might be like, whoa, that's an extreme case. I wouldn't put whiskey in my milk, but I will take a Kahlua, but the book says, you may think this is an extreme case, meeting us where we're at. And it says to us, so taking us where we need to go. It is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. Not this type of drinking, but the thinking, that insane thought that takes me back time and time again. A case of the suddenlies, not able to see the true from the false, having a drink in hand or a drug in hand. And it's like, what even happened? That. There's also where, the thoughts are on us and on us and on us, and we say, F it, I'm going to do it. There's those times where I think, man, I can do it this time, so here's how. You know what I mean? That's what we're talking about. And it says, we have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. Some of us have taken a little bit more time to ponder the consequences, but pondering the consequences will not keep me sober. Playing the tape to the end doesn't work. Thinking about all the bad things or why I want to stay sober, that doesn't work. It works for other things, but not for this. And it says, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea went out. The next day, we could ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. Now, this paragraph on page 37, man, it just awakened in me over the last few years. And so what are we talking about with that, like, curious mental phenomenon, mental obsession running parallel with our sound reasoning? Has anyone here ever seen the movie Tron? I haven't, but I'm going to reference it. But if you just think like any movie where they're running a race, I just imagine those light motorcycles, because I'm a visual person. But imagine one of those motorcycles, let's say it's the green motorcycle, and that green motorcycle, or if you're thinking Too Fast, Too Furious, I don't know any of those. No worries. Glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Too Fast, I don't know any of the characters, but the big muscly one, that narrows it down. So one of the big muscly car driver guys against the other big muscly car driver guy, so yeah. But I always think that green motorcycle is my sane reasoning, my sane thinking. I don't want to do it. I want to stay sober. I have to stay sober. I love my family. I don't want to lose my job. Every time I drink, it ruins my life. And I don't want those hangovers. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to do it. That is my same sound reasoning. And it's running a race. And what it is racing against is the mental obsession. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 drinks. My problem is alcohol, but I can smoke crack like a lady. If you were feeling the way I was feeling, you'd have to get drunk too. And they're running a race. And you see, the kicker with this race is the mental obsession will always win. Always win. That's it. Just how visualize for me the inevitability of that first drink. It will always win. Now, that same reasoning might be out in front for a little bit. It might be, around the curve. I don't know. I know in NASCAR, it's just like one turn in one way. So that's not the best thing ever, but best metaphor either. But it's that idea that, man, that same thought might be in the lead for a while. And I might think, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't need to drink. I don't want to drink. I don't want to use. I don't want to go back to my ex if it's codependency that brings you here. Whatever it is, I don't want to do it again. And inevitably, that insane thought cuts in front and wins the race. I was doing a talk on step one a number of months ago, and we were kind of joking about a race car bed, and I thought it was the perfect metaphor. My sane thought, I don't want to do this, is like I'm sitting in a race car bed. You know those ones you get, the toddlers who got the wheels on it? I'm in a race car bed. The mental obsession is a race car. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter how far of a head start my sane thought has. The insane one will always win. So what do I need to do? I need to find a way to stop the race. And that is through the spiritual awakening. So hopefully that, and I made a little, I'll put it in the WhatsApp chat, maybe after the meeting or when we post the recording. I made this little visual of it because I like making stickers and stuff. So I didn't turn it into a sticker, but I made a little visual of the two motorcycle things. So I'll pop it in the WhatsApp chat later. So it says, in some circumstances, back on 37, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. That insanely insufficient justification, that's the mental obsession. That's what we're talking about. And so we're talking about if you felt the way that I felt, you'd have to drink too. If you went through what I went through, you'd have to drink too. If you had my childhood, you'd have to drink too. Man, I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? That is what we're talking about. Gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified. And it says, we now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation, so that trying to justify our drinking before, we're talking about that mental obsession of what the terrific consequences may be. Terrific is just the scale of the consequences, not the quality of the consequences. Horrific could be a better synonym to put in there. Horrific consequences. And so what it's saying is those times, anyone here ever say, F it, F this, F that, F my sponsor, F the 12 steps, F it, or F, yeah, that. We're referencing the good old F it's, F them, F you, F me, F it all, right? F it. And even when we look at the consequences of what happens after, man, that was still an insane decision. So now what we're getting into is, this is everybody's favorite. I have a sticker for this. This is everyone's favorite metaphor. It's the Jaywalker. And I don't sell these. I just make them because I don't even have time on my hands. You got to have a hobby. And for years I'm like, I don't have a hobby. I have stickers. Sorry, I just had a moment. I have a little sticker that says Recovered Jaywalker. It's just fun. Because this is everybody's favorite story, the Jaywalker. So it says our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible, just baffling, right? Baffling with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. So for those, I know in some places in the world, jaywalking is not a thing because it's not illegal. Jaywalking is when you cross out into traffic against a light, in North America and in places in the UK, there's lights and crosswalks or zebra crossings or pelican crossings. That's some UK knowledge. And you cross with the light. And jaywalking is just when you cross the street however you want. So this is a guy that's crossing the street however he wants. And what we're going to do is we go through his story. We're going to see again the symptoms of his cycle. And so it says he gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. That sounds like some amazing comfort, if you were to ask me. You know what I'm saying? Woo! Just hopping in front of cars. I've been told to blame traffic once or twice before. I'm sure they were referencing this story, right? So it says he enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up until this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. And in the 1930s, that would just be like weird or abnormal, ideas of fun. It says luck then deserts him and he is slightly injured several times in succession. So he's finding himself like hurt again and again and again, very quickly in rapid succession. Did I ever find myself in rapid succession having some pretty serious consequences of my drinking or using or whatever brings you to this study? Did I ever have that? And then it says you would expect him if he were normal. So and not normal as in a call of judgment, but normal as in the sense of doesn't have the allergy, doesn't have the obsession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Have we had any experiences in our life where people would say, hey, I think it would make sense if you cut it out, and we didn't? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it says, presently he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. So we're seeing some progression of the consequences. And it says, within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you that he has decided to stop jaywalking for good. That's him. He's swearing off forever. He is never going to run out in traffic ever again. But in a few weeks, breaks both legs. So what happens between him saying, I'm never going to do it again, and him running out in traffic? The mental obsession. He had a thought that this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'm faster than that trolley car. You know what I'm saying? And it says, on through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful. To be careful is him trying to exert some power or some control over the physical allergy. No, this time I'm only going to have a few drinks, or I'll have water in between, or this and that. Like I'm going to be careful. I'm going to manage the consequences, trying to fight the allergy, or to keep off the streets altogether. What's he trying to fight? He's trying to fight the mental obsession. I'm not going to do it. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. Hey, did I try maybe I didn't try everything, but was I trying lots of things to not do this again? Trying different treatment centers, recovery houses, sober living, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, relationships, in and out of those. Was I trying these things? And did they not work? It says he shuts himself up in an asylum, read treatment center. We could also say psychiatric ward, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine. That's the mental obsession that took him out to the street, right? He said he was never going to do it. Mental obsession, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? And that's why in the sticker I got a little fire engine in the back, because I thought that was clever. And so it says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? It's a fun little, jaywalking, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit that if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. So it was my experience that, man, I didn't have control and there were consequences and it started to get bad. And I said I was never going to do it again. And that did not have any effect. We substituted what my problem is that I bring to the study, and it fits us exactly. This is me. I shouldn't be doing it. It's crazy that I'm doing it, but I continue to go back to it. And when it says we have been through the ringer, a ringer was before we had drying machines, dryers. I just forgot the name of them mid. I'm like, a drying machine. Ooh. And then next I will get into my automobile. Uh, where's my, I was going to grab my cell phone and be like, look, a telephonetic device. That's not, anywho. Focus. A ringer is, what they would do is you'd hand wash, and a ringer would be these two things that would, you put it through and it would squish your laundry and it would dry. Yeah. Oh, Rob, do you have a ringer injury? Oh man, I was going to point out. So it's squishing them tight, and you wouldn't want to catch your fingers or your elbow in the ringer, like, oh, it's going to hurt. You know what I mean? And those of us who have been through the ringer of our illness have to admit, yeah, that's us. And it says, however intelligent we may have been in other respects. So, man, there are areas of my life that, like, I was able to show up, again, making the joke about abs and abstinence. I was before things got really bad with my alcoholism and my addiction, I was incredibly disciplined. I went for runs. Some of you guys that know me know that this is a long time ago. Runs, Paige? Yeah, runs. I went for runs every single day. I did weight training. I did circuit training. I was training with people who went on to compete at the Olympics. I wasn't that good. I'm just saying it. But I took it that seriously because I can be a bit of a keener. I'm sure nobody picked up on that either. And that discipline that I had to get me to go for a run, and to get me to do all those, man, it wasn't enough. I was intelligent. I was disciplined in other areas. Man, before things got really bad, I was conditionally accepted to the University of Acadia. Like, I had good grades. I was not a stupid person, but it wasn't enough. And actually, I remember there was my rugby coach at the time. He was just baffled by how bad my life had gotten very quickly and how I was living my life. And he was like, Paige, I remember this. I want you to go for a run every day. Like, just go for a run. And like, man, I was not well. Like, at the time, I was homeless. So I wasn't doing too much extra cardio. But I remember just not even being able to do that at that point. Like, I have discipline, I have intelligence. You know what's up. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter how fit I am, how disciplined I am in other areas. In this one, it's not enough. So it says, however intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Strangely insane is that mental obsession. And what I think that's where we're going to leave off. So we have a little bit of an interlude into more, or into Fred's story next week when we pick it up. So I think oh, that's so cool. We have somebody who went to, I didn't end up making it to Acadia, but like I have family that, sorry. I will stop the recording before responding to everybody's things. But I'm here for, see, you put things in chat, it'll take me. So next week, we're going to interlude into Fred's story, and we're going to see. So Jim, he had some problems. Fred, he's got no problems. And yet the mental obsession took him. So I'll stop the recording. And I'll have just a quick announcement for some of the people in the UK. I think I should mention it. And then we'll say a prayer, and that'll be fun. So 1 second.